Welcome to The Life and Tragic Death of Thin Lizzy's Phil Lynott. Join us as we delve into the captivating story of one of rock music's most iconic figures, Phil Lynott, whose life was filled with soaring highs and devastating lows. So let's dive in. Philip Paris Lynott, born the 20th of August 1949, in Hallam Hospital in West Bromwich, England. His mother Philomena Lynott, born in Dublin, met Cecil Paris, his father, originally from Georgetown, British Guiana, in Birmingham in 1948. Their relationship lasted a few months until Paris moved to London for work. Philomena discovered she was pregnant shortly after Paris left and moved to a home for unmarried mothers in Selly Park, where Phil Lynott was born and baptised on September 4. Philomena later relocated to Manchester but remained in contact with Paris, who contributed to their son's support. Lynott, who growing up, felt different from his peers, initially attended school in Moss Side, Manchester. In 1957, due to experiences of racism and Lynott's mixed-race background, his mother decided to send him to live with his grandparents, Frank and Sarah Lynott, in Crumlin, Dublin. This move was significant as it provided Lynott with a father figure for the first time in his life. Despite the distance, his mother remained closely connected with him, managing the Clifton Grange Hotel in Whalley Range with her then-partner, Dennis Keeley. Known as The Biz, the hotel became a hub for show business personalities and was even mentioned in a song on Thin Lizzy's debut album. Lynott cherished his time in Dublin, enjoying a happy childhood and earning popularity among his peers at school. Introduced to music by his uncle Timothy's record collection, Lynott found inspiration in Motown and the Mamas and the Papas. His musical journey took flight in 1965 when he joined his inaugural band, the Black Eagles, as a lead singer, entertaining audiences with popular covers at local clubs across Dublin. During his time at the Christian Brothers School in Crumlin, he struck up a friendship with Brian Downey, eventually convincing him to join the band from the Liffey Beats. Unfortunately, internal strife and waning managerial support, especially after the departure of manager Joe Smith's sons, guitarists Danny and Frankie, led to the group's dissolution. Leaving the family home, Lynott settled into a flat in Clontarf and briefly joined the group Kama Sutra, where he honed his frontman skills and learned to engage with audiences. In early 1968, he collaborated with bassist Brendan "Brush" Shields to establish Skid Row. Drummer Noel Bridgman joined the band after Brian Downey declined the offer. Under the management of Ted Carroll, who would later manage Thin Lizzy, Skid Row covered diverse songs like 8 Miles High, Hey Jude, and tracks by Jimi Hendrix. Lynott, not playing an instrument yet, used an echo box to manipulate his voice during instrumentals. Sporting boot polish under his eyes and engaging in mock fights with Shields on stage, Lynott developed his captivating stage presence, a trademark he carried into Thin Lizzy. In mid-1968, Gary Moore replaced guitarist Bernard Cheevers, who left to work at the Guinness Brewery in Dublin full-time. Despite rising success and the release of the single, New Faces, Old Places, Shields grew concerned about Phil Lynott's occasionally off-key singing, eventually tracing the issue to Lynott's tonsils. Lynott took a leave of absence to address the problem, during which Shields decided to take over lead vocals and downsize the band to a trio. To alleviate his guilt over essentially firing his friend, Shields taught Lynott bass guitar, selling him a Fender Jazz bass and providing lessons. Lynott and Brian Downey swiftly formed a new band called Orphanage, featuring guitarist Joe Staunton and bassist Pat Quigley, blending original compositions with covers of artists like Bob Dylan, Free, and Jeff Beck. Lynott, still mastering the bass, occasionally played rhythm guitar while handling lead vocals. In 2006, a collection of Skid Row and Orphanage demo tapes featuring Lynott surfaced, marking his earliest recordings thought to be lost for decades. In late 1969, Lynott and Brian Downey, introduced to guitarist Eric Bell by them keyboardist Eric Rickson, decided to form Thin Lizzy after recognizing Bell's superior guitar skills. With Lynott now proficient on bass, the quartet was complete. The band's name was inspired by the comic character, Thin Lizzy, from the Dandy, which referred to the Ford Model T car. They added the H to mimic the Dublin accent's pronunciation of thin. Following the release of their debut single, The Farmer, in July 1970, Rickson departed the band as the others deemed him unnecessary. In Thin Lizzy's early years, Phil Lynott, despite his roles as singer, bassist, and chief songwriter, remained reserved and introverted on stage. The spotlight often focused on guitarist Eric Bell, initially seen as the band's leader. During the recording of their second album, Shades of a Blue Orphanage in 1972, Lynott nearly left Thin Lizzy to form a new band with Deep Purple's Richie Blackmore and Ian Pace, called Babyface. However, after a brief jam session, Lynott returned to Thin Lizzy, preferring to lead his own band. Despite financial struggles, Thin Lizzy recorded an album of Deep Purple covers as Funky Junction, with Lynott abstaining from singing due to feeling his voice didn't match Ian Gillan's style. Towards the end of 1972, Thin Lizzy received their first major break in the UK by supporting Slade, then at the peak of their commercial success. Inspired by Noddy Holder's mirrored top hat, Lynott attached a mirror to his bass, a feature he carried over to subsequent tours. However, on the opening night, an altercation erupted between Lynott and Slade's manager Chas Chandler, who criticized Lynott's stage presence and threatened to remove Lizzy from the tour unless improvements were made. Lynott subsequently refined his onstage rapport and became more engaging with the audience, a characteristic that defined the band's performances throughout the decade. Thin Lizzy's breakthrough came in 1973 with a rock rendition of the traditional Irish song, Whiskey in the Jar, featuring artwork by Jim Fitzpatrick. Despite this success, subsequent singles failed to chart, and with the departure of Eric Bell, quickly followed by Gary Moore and briefly Brian Downey, Thin Lizzy faced near collapse by mid-1974. Their fortunes changed with the recruitment of guitarists Scott Gorham and Brian Robertson and the release of Jailbreak in 1976, catapulting Thin Lizzy to international stardom with the album's smash hit, The Boys Are Back in Town. However, while touring with Rainbow, Lynott contracted hepatitis, forcing the band to cancel their tour dates. Befriending Huey Lewis during Clover's support tour with Thin Lizzy, Lynott's frontman skills left a lasting impression on Lewis, who later found success in the 1980s. Lynott's exposure to American audiences greatly influenced his songwriting, with tracks like Cowboy Song and Massacre reflecting their US tours, especially his fondness for Los Angeles. With mainstream recognition, Thin Lizzy embarked on extensive world tours, following up Jailbreak's triumph with hit albums like Johnny the Fox in 1976, Bad Reputation in 1977, Black Rose, A Rock Legend in 1979, and the iconic live album Live and Dangerous in 1978, featuring Lynott prominently on the cover. Despite their commercial success, Thin Lizzy faced internal challenges, including personnel changes, with Brian Robertson temporarily replaced by Gary Moore in 1976, and permanently the following year, partly due to clashes with Lynott. In 1978, Lynott ventured into projects beyond Thin Lizzy, showcasing his versatility and collaboration skills. He notably contributed to Jeff Wayne's musical version of The War of the Worlds, taking on the role of Parson Nathaniel on The Spirit of Man. Lynott also lent his vocals to various artists, including backing vocals with Bob Geldof on Blast Furnace and the Heat Waves' Blue Wave EP. With a keen interest in punk rock's emergence, Lynott formed The Greedies, an ad hoc band, alongside members of the Sex Pistols, The Damned, and the Boomtown Rats. They played energetic shows in London, blending Lizzy classics with Pistols tracks. The Greedies recorded the festive single, A Merry Jingle, in 1979, featuring Thin Lizzy members and Pistols Steve Jones and Paul Cook. Lynott's collaboration extended to Johnny Thunders' solo debut album. By 1980, amidst Thin Lizzy's ongoing success, Lynott launched a solo career with Solo in Soho, yielding hits like Dear Miss Lonely Hearts and King's Call, a tribute to Elvis Presley. His second solo effort, the Philip Lynott album, in 1982, saw mixed reception despite the success of Old Town and Yellow Pearl, the latter becoming the top of the Pops theme. As the early 1980s unfolded, Thin Lizzy faced commercial challenges, compounded by Lynott's escalating drug use and recurring asthma attacks. Following the departure of longtime manager Chris O'Donnell and guitarist Scott Gorham's desire to leave, Lynott made the difficult decision to disband Thin Lizzy in 1983. His heroin use began to impact performances, notably during shows in Japan where he struggled to obtain drugs. However, he rallied for the band's memorable performance at the Reading Festival and their final concert with Lynott as frontman in Nuremberg on September 4. After Thin Lizzy disbanded in 1983, Lynott collaborated on the rock and roll single, We Are the Boys Who Make All the Noise, with Roy Wood, Chaz Hodges, and John Coughlin. He continued collaborations with Gary Moore, achieving chart success with singles like Parisienne Walkways, and later with Out in the Fields. In 1984, Lynott formed Grand Slam but faced challenges due to financial constraints and his heroin addiction, leading to the band's dissolution by year-end. During 1983 to 1985, Lynott collaborated with British R&B artist Junior Giscombe, co-writing several songs, including The Lady Loves to Dance, mastered with producer Tony Visconti, but remained unreleased except for demos. Lynott expressed disappointment over not participating in Live Aid, organized by his friends Bob Geldof and Midge Ure, attributing it to the Band Aid Trust's preference for commercially successful artists. In 1984, Lynott captained a team on the BBC quiz show Pop Quiz. His final single, 19, co-written by Lawrence Archer and Mark Stanway, was produced by Paul Hardcastle and released shortly before his death. bearing no relation to Hardcastle's earlier hit. Hardcastle recalled Lynott's admiration and collaboration, noting his bassline contribution. Lynott promoted 19 on television shows in December 1985, discussing plans for future work, including potential collaborations with Gary Moore and Thin Lizzy reformations, before his passing. Recorded material with Archer, Lewis, and News members in 1985 remained unreleased. Personally, born in England but identifying strongly with his Irish roots, Lynott always considered himself Irish. His pride in his heritage was evident in his interactions, often correcting misconceptions about Ireland. In the early 1980s, he invested in properties on Dublin's Howth Peninsula, including White Horses, which he gifted to his mother as a 50th birthday present and later became a memorial site. Lynott married Caroline Crowther in 1980, with whom he had 2 children, Sarah and Kathleen. The marriage dissolved in 1984 due to Lynott's escalating drug use. Additionally, he had a son, McDara Lamb, born in 1968 and put up for adoption, whom he only discovered later in life. Lynott was an avid Manchester United supporter and counted football legend George Best among his close friends, even becoming a shareholder of the club. Lynott's poetry debut, Songs for While I'm Away, published in 1974, comprised 21 poems, mostly Thin Lizzy lyrics, with one exception, A Holy Encounter, limited to 1,000 copies. A subsequent release in 1977, titled Philip, followed. In 1997, both volumes were consolidated into a single edition, Songs for While I'm Away, featuring artwork by Tim Booth and Jim Fitzpatrick, along with original introductions by Peter Fallon and John Peel. Phil Lynott's final years were plagued by drug and alcohol addiction, culminating in his collapse on December 25, 1985, at his home in Kew. Discovered by his mother, who was unaware of his heroin addiction, she contacted his wife, Caroline, who knew about it and immediately identified the problem as serious. He was rushed by his wife Caroline to a drug clinic at Cloud's house near Shaftesbury. Diagnosed with septicemia at Salisbury Infirmary, his condition deteriorated rapidly despite briefly regaining consciousness. Phil succumbed to pneumonia and heart failure due to septicemia on January 4, 1986, at the age of 36. Lynott's funeral took place on January 9 at St. Elizabeth's Church, Richmond, with many former members of Thin Lizzy present. A second service followed at Howth Parish Church near Dublin on January 11. He was laid to rest in St. Fintan's Cemetery in Sutton, County Dublin. And there you have it. As we conclude our journey through the life and legacy of Thin Lizzy's frontman, Phil Lynott, may his music continue to inspire generations to come. Like and subscribe, and stay tuned for more compelling stories from the world of music. Thanks for watching and bye for now.